Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Shaunna Williams here with me today. Thank you so much for joining me, Shaunna. I'm super excited that we get to be on the podcast together, especially right now at this time. I know we had tried to get on the podcast a while ago, but it seems like there was a whole completion of energies that needed to happen because I discovered, Shaunna, when you were doing your 5 Days of Bliss back in August, and I joined in on that practice, that ceremonial practice, and loved it and wanted to have you on the podcast back then. But there were some intentions that I set during that practice that have really come to full fruition. I mean, just today. Okay. And we were just having a chat about it and sharing with Shaunna's people about how all the intentions that I set then in August have just unfolded with this alignment of divine bliss that can be so subtle and yet so potent, and such a ground of being for us to rest into with such simple practices like connecting with the elements. And people who've been listening to my podcast and following my work know how central the elements are. And it just brings us back to the basic building blocks of life and the basic building blocks of our health and our well-being on all levels: physical, emotional, spiritual. And I loved it coming into your 5 Days of Bliss, that was the focus, the elements, and that the elements are the basic building blocks of bliss, because we so often, listen to people talking about bliss being this fancy, elaborate something that feels unattainable for most people. But when we bring it back to the simple elements of life, it just, we can all just take a sigh of relief and get in the bathtub and light a candle and breathe some air, put our feet on the earth barefoot, and suddenly we're reconnecting with the basic bliss of life. So I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more, Shaunna, and share about what drew you to create this 5 Days of Bliss program, and what now you're offering it again around this winter solstice, which I found out about right as this whole intention was coming full circle. So I'm super excited to have you on. So please do share more about it.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm Shaunna Williams, the mystical minister, and my medicine is in sovereignty. And so what I specialize in is supporting healers, leaders, and way showers that struggle with addiction, sexual shame, toxic loops to heal so that they can lead from their sovereignty. And so creating or having the 5 Days of Bliss come through me, it's a part of my ancestry, it's a part of my medicine, it's a part of my family in the Gullah, which are medicine people, shaman people, and then also Cherokee, Blackfoot, and different additional indigenous tribes. So it's all about that earth medicine and working with the elements. I truly believe that, and the way in which we connect with the elements brings about a presence and a deep connection within ourselves, because we are all of the elements, and it also allows us to tap into God, into divinity. And in that allows us to have a state of ananda, a state of bliss. And it doesn't mean that we bypass or we don't have all the other things that bring the fullness of life, but as we're present and grounded into the elements, into ourselves, into divinity, we're powerful, we're sovereign, we have the ability to access sovereignty. So the 5 Days of Bliss came to me as a way in which to bring everyone together in their own magic. It's not that, yes, I'm facilitating, I'm leading, I'm guiding the rituals, I'm sharing the magic and the medicine of what I've been taught and what's been passed down to me, but we're each our own beings practicing the magic and creating it into the world in a powerful way that's individuated for each of us. So the 5 Days of Bliss would be completely different without Sama there, without, of course I'm going to be there, or without you there. But when we all come together, it brings about this magic and this potency that's astronomical and that reverberates throughout all. And I think that right now, why it's coming back to me, because I'm on hiatus, I call it my devotional time. So I'm not taking any additional clients for 2020. And I'm really taking this time to just be with myself, be with God, be with my own rituals, and really, you know, nurture my heart in a deeper way than I do just on a regular basis, like a deepening of those things. And so as I was moving and I was doing my own ecstatic dance practice with a friend, it came through within the first 5 minutes of that practice to do another round of this. And right now, where we're heading into the winter solstice, we have all of the things happening planetarily with Aquarius, Saturn, all of those different conjunctions that are happening that people are talking about in the world. But beyond that, it's being able to close out this year, which has been so wild and brought about so much sight, vision, understanding, hardship, pain, sadness, joy, connection, disconnection for us, to be able to close it in a way of presence, deep connection, and our power and the magic of these rituals. And so that's why it's now. That's why we're coming together right now, because I want everyone to know about it. I want as many people to be a part of it and practicing this right now, and just simply following the nudge that I get from my divine wisdom, my divine intuition, to do this now. Even if it's just another person, me and Sama, that are doing it, it's going to be powerful. And I also want to speak it out loud on a speakerphone, so that if you feel called and it's for you to be a part of this 5-day experience, then I definitely want you to join us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Could you go back to the part where you were sharing about some of the spiritual lineages in your family and in your ancestry that are influencing these practices? There were some name, like the one in your family, that was a name that I'm not familiar with, and I'm curious to learn more about it. Maybe you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you're talking about the Gullah Geechee. So the Gullah Geechee people were brought here, and they basically are found. It's where Hilton Head has taken over some of the land, but the Gullah Geechee has like the Geechee Islands that are right there in North Carolina, South Carolina, and I mean, right now well, in the last few years, there's been a lot of controversy of that land being taken over and being bought out. But just in the essence of the Gullah Geechee people, the Geechee and the Gullah, it's that they came here and they had this whole city to themselves, where they would be unbothered by, you know, any people that were not of their tribe, not of their background, to where they could grow their own food, pretty much had their own city, their own town, and were very self-sustaining. And so they had their own shamans. There was also church, because like religion had come in and done its thing, but there were shamans, and there were people that, I mean, like children of the earth medicine. And then also, obviously, there's more knowledge of the Cherokee bloodline, and that with medicine and medicine people and medicine work and shamanism and things of that nature. So that's like in my blood. My dad told me a story of my aunts that had done a circle, and they were out in the woods, and my dad was having this experience with these malevolent energies, and they came out and did some earth magic and earth medicine for him, and he was able to get out of that situation. And so like that's in my blood. That's not like from an outside initiation. That's just like within my DNA. And then I've also done different shamanic. I'm a part of a mystery school lineage that's ancient. And so I have those initiations that I've done for the last couple of years. And so I have that medicine that's come through for the elements in which I share as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so did you also mention that the Cherokee traditions are in your blood as well?
Yeah, I spoke on the Cherokee. So I have Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Blackfoot are the native tribes that are in my family's lineage and my family's history.
Okay. And the Gullah Geechee, did you say? Did I say it correctly? Where were they originally from?
So originally from, I believe, if I'm like recalling correctly, my dad told me of like a few different places that we've come from. but I mean like from Africa, from those when like the original Black people were brought here, they were a part of that original taking from their land.
Mm-hmm.
So like those areas in which Black people were picked up from is
So,
where they were from.
so those were the names, two names of two tribes, the
The
Gullah
Gullah and the
and the
Geechee, and
Geechee.
so it's called the Gullah Geechee.
And how did it happen that they ended up having their own place? I mean, do you know the history about that?
Yeah, so I know the history, but I don't like, I can't fully recall it, like how it all took place. But
Uh-huh.
I mean, you can go and look at Gullah Geechee and do the research. They have like there's a whole like governing body that's over the Gullah Geechee people that are made up of the Gullah Geechee people, and they have like you can learn about the heritage. Anyone can come in and learn about it. I'm a part of that group, just kind of like a silence part of it, but
Yeah.
not like like you would be if you came in and be a part of it. That's how I'm a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can learn about any of the information with the history that's there. But I don't want to misspeak on it right now.
Right.
Like I learned
Okay.
it when I was first introduced to it, but I don't want to do it harm by trying to repeat it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, thank you for sharing what you do know about it. I just feel like these stories are so important to
Mm-hmm.
bring forth
Mm-hmm.
because it feels very potent to know that, given that I was never taught anything about that sort of thing in my education. Um, and, you know, without having some connection to someone in that lineage, you know, I wouldn't know to even look that up or without living nearby or being in the same community. I mean, I'm born and raised on the other side of the continent. uh,
Yes.
but these types of stories, especially about, you know, people from Africa brought here and finding that kind of sovereignty despite the circumstances of, you know, the enslavement circumstances of most Africans being brought here in those times. I'm assuming that was the circumstance of them being brought here, just by the way you were saying that, right? And then
Right.
finding that sovereignty. It's not like they chose to come here out of, you know, it was like there was this other thing going on. Then finding that sovereignty of having their own, having your own. I mean, that just seems like such a heritage of reclaiming sovereignty that is there in your bloodline, and that these powerful practices that you're sharing and this focus of your work that you're sharing with others is, it just feels so rich and so rooted and so potent from that heritage. And I'm just so grateful that you're sharing this.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's also like just as being a Black person that's been raised in the South, it cannot be missed that like over and over our history has tried to be erased, like over and over. Like the strength that we have has been erased. The thing that you learn most about Black history is enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's what they
That's
want
all I
to be remembered, right? They don't want there to be a remembrance of sovereignty, of right, of entitlement. And so the thing that we have always had are our spiritual practices, are being able to figure out ways to covertly be able to remember our medicine for it not to be taken away. But then there's been appropriation of that very medicine. Like when we think of Haiti, like the Haiti Great Revolution, like that was wonderful, but still there was appropriation of the very thing that, you know, that the settlers and white people wanted it to be looked upon as evil, but they would take that medicine and magic to support themselves while condemning and damning that very magic. And the same thing has happened from other things, like that there's a supreme religion or supreme spiritual practice, but they all have been derived from these African spiritualities to a certain extent. And so it's like being able to not allow it to be stolen, not allow it to be appropriated in the way in which like we can't call upon our own magic and use our own magic. And so like I share it because a very like a Lakota Native American way of belief is that like we all are one, we all are connected, and so the medicine is the medicine and it's here to be shared with all. But the way that settlers and colonizers have used it is that like no, this is ours. This is our medicine, you know, like it is not yours. And so it's being able to reclaim it and to know it and then to choose to share it. Now, if people then take it and try to make it their own, that's on them. But it's to be able to know that we have the very right as well. And so, like, I share from that place, but also knowing that, like, I'm choosing to share this with you because it's for the greater good of all of humanity and it's bigger than just me.
Yeah. And you know, this brings up part of what I teach in my social justice allyship, but also personal healing work for people with any amount of European ancestry. Because, you know, we all, I don't know if you do or all people do, but a lot of people of mixed heritage do have some European ancestry. And I'm of mixed heritage. And so I have European ancestry. I have Choctaw ancestry. I even have a Black ancestor through breast milk ancestry, which I've learned about as something that's very potent as well. And it's something that but what the point that I'm saying is that we have this mixed ancestry, and it's very easy to align with you know, part of appropriation is trying to claim something that has an intrinsic power and steal that intrinsic power for oneself to replace a power that was an intrinsic power that was diminished or harmed through trauma. And that's what I feel like goes on in the European, or has gone on in the European lineages, is that, you know, if you look back to some of the spiritual lineages, the earth-based spiritual lineages in the European ancestry, they have very similar practices working with the elements and, you know, working with spiritual power from an intrinsic empowerment place, but got, you know, had a sort of an internal colonization or what would you call it, annihilation of those practices by, you know, the Romans and, you know, other historical processes of killing off and annihilating the midwives and the herbalists and the practitioners of these earth-based spiritualities. And so that unresolved trauma wounding, that collective heritage of unresolved trauma wounding creates this propensity for then appropriating spiritual practices from people whose lineages managed to stay somewhat more intact. And I see you shaking your head. Maybe you have a different perspective, and you can share that with us, because
It's not, I mean, I don't know if this is a whole conversation
it is.
that
It is.
that desires a bandwidth that I do not have in this moment, or a desire that I desire to go into depths with.
Uh,
Um, but I mean, I would say that there's more responsibility for colonizers, and like European is what you're using. There's more responsibility there to be taken when it comes to appropriating cultures like Indian cultures, African cultures, Asian, like any Asian cultures, any other cultures, African spiritualism, like any of that, there's more responsibility to be taken there. And I know that like some of the cries have been that like, you know, we don't have our own or whatever, and so there's been a lot of Celtic stuff that's been coming through, but um, it's not really like the responsibility of the oppressed to try to make it okay.
Oh no, that's not what I was.
That, you know, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm just saying like in the way of responsibility.
Right.
And like, I mean, when it was that we kept it intact was the thing. It's like it's a part of our blood, and there are still things that we lost, you know, that can never be replaced or regained or reclaimed.
Absolutely.
Because they're lost forever. And then in the way of appropriation, I love the definition that you gave. And what I would also say is that it's when those things, those very things that have been taken away from the oppressed people are used for other people who are taking it, is used for them to be able to have a different class experience, a different financial experience while there's poverty and poorness happening.
Absolutely.
So there's some reconciliation to be done there.
Absolutely. And I that's where all of what I was sharing leads to, is exactly what you were saying, is that in order for this collective healing to happen, that responsibility needs to be taken. And that healing of that European lineage and the harm done between people of European descent to each other, and that annihilation of the European lineages, that wounding needs to be healed. And that's some of the work that I try to support, is so that heritage can be reclaimed, so that then there's not this, you know, justification or need or unconscious gravitation towards appropriating those traditions from other lineages that, you know, are typically in these more oppressed groups, you know, in what you were just saying, in poverty and things like that, and a reconciliation of privilege of the European lineages and that whole history. And that is a big thing that I'm not even fumbling around with my words. I'm not having the bandwidth to address that either. But of course, this, you know, I feel like this is a really important conversation in these spiritual communities. And I really appreciate you being available to speak to it to the degree that we have today. And, you know, I just feel very devoted to that reconciliation and that responsibility, reclaiming, you know, taking responsibility and like that. And so that's why I brought all of that up, is to share how important that is to me, and to share with the community where I think some of those sticky points are and why it can be so challenging with people with even who think they have the best of intentions, are really, if we're operating from an empty cup or a broken lineage or unresolved ancestral trauma that we can't face, you know, and that our lineage was taught to just go and take it from other people instead of facing the pain of having had those traumas perpetrated against our own ancestry, you know.
Yeah. I'll say these two things. One is that the greatest way of reconciliation is through reparations, and
Yes.
through paying Black people, paying Black, Indigenous, people of color, and then also like giving us our rightful seat at the table. It's not even like, you know, out of like pity or like, let me make room. It's like, no, we deserve to be here. We have always deserved to be here, as most of you guys have been standing on our shoulders, you know? So it's like being able to give that rightful seat at the table. and then uplifting the experts and the professionals that are BIPOC people. So I love that we're coming together, and I don't want it to ever, the greatest place that this reconciliation and coming together can be from is from a place of um, like honor and honoring me and honoring people and honoring each other, and like allowing there to be space for that honoring, and not from a place of what is called white guilt, or from a place of pity, or from a place of charity, but from a place of honor and rightful placing. Like this has always been how it's to be. So then the question comes up of like, how willing am I in my white body, my white passing, to give up some of my privilege in order for this rightfulness to take its place? And that's kind of, I feel, has been the question that's been coming up for a lot of people this year. And there's also been a lot of guilt that has come up, and so there's been a lot of claiming of like, oh, but wait, I'm not just white, I have all of these different things. You've been passing as white your entire life. It doesn't discredit your history and like what's in your blood, but you aren't black, you aren't dark skinned, you aren't experiencing the same thing. And so yes, there is that that transgenerational trauma, and there's so many different lines of trauma that plays in being a black person in America in general. And then especially as it's still happening in the world today. I mean, like there was just another kid that was shot by a cop. They just sentenced a guy to death last night that was sentenced at 18 years old, and it's been years and years later, and they killed him. You know, like there's still crimes and hate and punishment being played out against black people. So it's like, how can you heal a trauma that just continues to happen? And so we keep doing what we can do, but what we can do is reconcile on the level in which we can. And I think that's where that responsibility piece comes in that I was talking about. So all of that to say, it's beautiful that we're having this conversation. And the reason why I was like, I don't have the bandwidth is because I made the boundary long ago that I'm not here to educate people on this. It's like either you know and you're ready and I can support you on the other side of it, like walking hand in hand, honoring me, I honor you, and we're doing this work. But if you're still in the figuring it out, charity based phase, I'm not there for that. I don't have the energy for that because that's exhausting, and I no longer do that type of activism work. And so, yeah, so now that brings us to like, okay, that's why we're doing the 5 days of bliss. Like, this is meet me over here, and let's do this magic here, and let's work together here, and let's raise our collective conscious and humanity here.
Excellent. I'm fully cheering that on and super happy to participate in that and meet you there. I'm so glad. And yeah, and I'm so glad that you are willing to clarify all of that for me and for the listeners and be so clear about where you're coming from. I just want to honor your medicine. Is, I mean, from the get-go when I started listening to what you had to say, I'm like, okay, this lady, she's got it going on. So I really thank you for all of that and your clarity, crystal clarity. So if folks want to get more in touch with you, well, first of all, we're going to put the link for this 5 days of bliss, okay, to meet in that place of being together in these practices and nurturing this beauty, this bliss, this fundamental foundation of connection and alignment with the divine and healing for everyone, collectively and individually, and benefiting from your crystal clarity as our hostess, right? Or would you call it hostess or priestess, or what would you call your role in that?
Well, I'm gonna just guide and facilitation. Like I have a lot of titles and roles, but this I'm just guiding and facilitation and sharing the medicine.
All right. So you'll be our guide and our facilitator, and we're gonna put a link to that. But could you give us some more of the details about it?
Yeah. So we start December 17th, and you have it's daily practices. So day one we start with water, and so you'll be given rituals pertaining to water. And I mean, they are every single day can change your life and can change your family's life and can change your community and the earth. So water, day two is fire, and then day three is air. And I always it's the mental. Air is a mental element. So it's like whatever's moving in our mental space, kind of some of the things that we've been talking about today, like this is kind of where our collective consciousness, all of that is like in the element of air. So that's always a fun day. And then 4 is earth, and that's the day that we do the earth blessing, which I feel is very important. So it's being able to show up to all of these days to get to earth. And then spirit, which is one that I haven't really seen a lot of people add into their elementals, but spirit is absolutely important and integral. So we have a day of spirit, and those practices are also very beautiful. So we come together for those 5 days. You have 24 hours to complete each assignment. And obviously there gets to be a timeline, because it wouldn't be daily assignments if they're just rolling over into days. And so to keep the integrity of the space and the integrity and the sacredness of each day and each embodiment assignment, you get 24 hours to complete them. And then there will be a post into the Facebook group that will be created, and you'll be able to post each day into the threads of the respective element that it's on. So that's kind of that part. Once you click the link, you'll be guided to a sign-up sheet, which is kind of like your declaration of being a part of it. It also gives me some information of what your intention is for joining. And then we'll pretty much take off. The first day, I'll announce them usually at 8 a.m. what the element and the video and things of that day is, and you'll get the video and also an email. And I'll guide you through different things throughout different days via video. And I'm also available. I'm not extremely available, but I'm available to message if you have any experiences that you would like to share with me personally instead of inside of the group. So it's powerful. It's free of monetary, but it's definitely, there's an investment of your time and devotion, and it's important. And like your return is going to be out of this world. And obviously, like when I say out of this world, I mean generally out of this physical realm of comprehension and this conscious realm of comprehension. So it's gonna be a wild time. And I'm also very much just kind of like watching to see like what God has for this creation, for it coming out at this time that it is. And so I'm also just kind of like, ooh, I'm excited to see what all comes through. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to that inner guidance and inspiration, that divine guidance and inspiration to bring this to the world and to offer this. So folks who are listening can find the link to sign up in the show notes wherever you're watching this or listening to this podcast episode. And are there any other ways that people might want to contact you?
Yes, so there's my website, www.mysticalminister.com. It kind of goes over some of my services. I do DNA activations, emotional cord cutting, dance and movement therapy, transformational breath work, so on and so forth. I also have programs that are on there. And then I am on Instagram at @Shaunna_Williams.
Okay, wonderful. Exactly what I had in mind, even though my question wasn't super clear. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Listeners know that if you want to learn more about what's going on at the Womb Centered Healing Temple, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com. And thank you all so much for listening. And that's all for now. Until next time.